Hey everyone, welcome back to Rolling Stories. I'm your host, Adrian Tan, and I'm thrilled to have Soreya Senior today joining us on the show. Soreya is a seasoned HR professional with over 30 years of experience spanning diverse industries, and let me tell you, her insights are about to blow your mind. We're going to deep dive into her incredible career journey, what factors have contributed to her longevity and tremendous success in the HR field. And Surya will also be sharing with us a culture shock moment where she was treated in a pretty disposable manner and how that formative experience ended up shaping her entire perspective on company culture and the role of strong leadership. We will also be unpacking her observation on common red flags that signal a toxic, problematic work culture, and on the flip side, the hallmark of a truly healthy and thriving environment. So, as you can see, a lot of exciting stuff to talk about. This is going to be a fascinating conversation, my friends. Soria has so much wisdom to share with us, and I can't wait for you to dive in. Let's get started. Soria, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Adrian.
So, first question. You have an impressive 30 years of career spanning various HR and leadership roles. What would you say are key factors that have contributed to that longevity and success in the field?
I think ultimately the short answer is I love what I do. I think HR is an ever evolving landscape in terms of what you can learn. I've had the privilege of working in loads of different sectors and organizations, which keeps it fresh. And I think ultimately I really like people and understanding what motivates them. And over the years, you know, society has changed, cultures have changed. People have more awareness around culture and people are owning their own career journeys more than they ever used to. And I think that's what keeps it fresh for me and exciting because you learn from other people. And, having a great network and a great community where I'm based in Cambridge, it's all about learning, connection, and community. And I think that's what helps the longevity of it.
Right, right. And I want to dive straight into the interesting part that we shared earlier on, which is the culture shock moment, where you mentioned before, you were treated in a rather disposable way. Could you bring us back to that moment? And I hope it wouldn't trigger some PTSD in you.
Yeah, no, I think I've sort of rationalized it now as a learning opportunity, to be honest with you, Adrian, because I think if you don't learn and grow from those situations, you genuinely do get PTSD and you don't move forward. So I think, this organization, it was a bit distressed, should we say. And, it was a very hierarchical leadership. It was what I would call a not very modern sense of leadership. It didn't really want to listen to employees or even to good advice. And you would be asked to do something and you would deliver it, and then it would be instantly wrong. And I think that was a culture shock for me because I'd always been sort of engaged. People would listen to advice, and at the end of the day, you're there to provide advice. Whether people choose to take it or not is up to them. But I think sometimes when you're engaged as the expert or the subject matter expert, there's an element of, look, I've been here before, I've seen this, I really want to save you from sort of disaster. And it was just very dismissive. It was a culture of sort of fear. And it was a culture shock for me. It was, as I say, it was a learning opportunity, but it was an opportunity to go, okay, there are times when you just literally provide advice. Don't get too emotionally attached to that advice and investing too much emotion in trying to change people's minds about it. It's up to them.
Hmm.
But it was hard at the time to just go, I'm giving you all my energy. I'm putting so much hard work into, preparing this advice, delivering it in the right way. I'm giving you what you're asking for. And it was so draining and upsetting, in some conversations. But like I say, on reflection, it took a little while to reflect on it. You grow from it and you go, okay, there's an element of maybe it was me in the way I articulated the advice and delivered it. But also there's an element of recognizing that if you provide advice, it's up to the individual whether they choose to take it or not.
Mm.
And I think that was the growth opportunity for me and the learning that I took away from that.
In hindsight, do you think there might be some red flags, especially during your interview sessions, that may have told you or implied to you that there are some issues with the company?
Oh, yeah, completely. And, sort of, should we say naively, I thought I'm up for a challenge. I can do this. And then you sort of recognize that maybe wasn't the challenge I was looking for. And you do sometimes you do get red flags. And I think, sometimes, when you're thinking about developing your HR career,
Mhm,
there are times when you sort of go, I don't recognize the challenge on the scale that it's going to be, or what it truly unravels itself to be. So I think, when, they sort of explained the situation, you sort of go, this is a learning opportunity. I get exposure to, X, Y, and Z, but the exposure I had to it, again, it is a learning opportunity, and it sort of framed a lot of my philosophy sort of moving forward about culture and my thinking on it. But yeah, there were some definite red flags that
mm.
if I were in the same situation again today, I'd be like, thank you for the opportunity to interview me, but this isn't the right opportunity for me. And, sort of gracefully walk away from it.
But as you shared, this entire experience really, I would say, lay the foundation to shaping your perspective on company culture as well as the role of good leadership. So, what is your
Yeah.
general perspective towards company culture and also the importance of a good leader?
So I think culture is owned by everybody. I genuinely believe that. I think culture is a really tangible thing that you can touch and feel. It's not this at there is an atmosphere. If you know there's a good culture in an organization, sometimes you can genuinely feel it when you walk into that office space, right? And meet people. Culture starts with the leadership because these are founders, co-founders, and it starts with how they even interact with each other. What are their personal values, right? How do they behave? Because culture is systems, practices, beliefs, and values. And we use behaviors and values to bring culture to life.
Mhm.
And if they're if leadership is talking about a culture, but you see completely opposite behaviors to that and counter behaviors to that, we have a problem. So it's really being intentional. It's about having that, as leaders, the first kind of the first rule we'll call it of leadership is self-awareness, right? How do you behave? What impacts how others behave? Because you are a role model, you are leading. And I think if people don't see that, you have this disconnect of you can preach whatever culture you believe you have, poster on a wall, put it on your website, wherever, but people will feel that. They will observe your behaviors as a leader, and more and more people will hold your feet to the fire if they see you not behaving in the way that you've described or are holding them accountable with their behaviors.
So it's not so much importance to observe what's the philosophy, what they say, but it's really observing what the philosopher do on a day-to-day
Yeah.
regular basis.
Now, I was going to say, as much as it's a cliche, it's actions speak louder than words. So, we're in adult working relationships here. It's not parent child, less about that hierarchy these days in organizations. So it's not do as I say,
Hmm.
but people will sort of reflect and do as you do.
Exactly. And on that note, you must have observed or be more intentional in seeing how good leaders behave, especially on their daily activities to drive culture. Are there some commonalities that you're observing across all these good leaders?
I think it is around that self awareness. I think it is about being intentional.
Mm,
People want to, mean what they say what they mean and then do the doing.
mhm,
So a lot of cliches in that whole sentence right there. But, people do want to be more intentional about it. People are wanting to get a better understanding of what culture is
mm,
and, how it's delivered through every interaction in the organization. And it's also about better communication. I'm seeing leaders want to be really thoughtful in their communication, taking the time over that communication as well.
mm.
And I think that's so important, and it's not just about how you send that email
Yeah.
or, you know, the blogs you write. It's about even, you know, how do you hold your meetings? Are you conscious of people's time in meetings?
Mm,
Do you have an agenda? Is there a cadence for that? How do you keep the organization updated? What's the sort of language that you're using, when you're communicating with the organization? Are you going out there and communicating one to one with people and just, you know, walking up to people and understanding, not just going,
mm,
right, I'm going to get you all in that meeting room for an hour every month to update you, or I'll send, a CEO, weekly email update about what's going on. It's, walking around, understanding your teams, knowing who they are.
mhm.
And I think that's so important of good leaders, because if they don't understand what's going on in the organization, how can you lead? How can you remove those blockers for people? How can you develop your organization? How can you make people thrive
Mm,
if you're disconnected from them
mm,
and not really engaging? We want engaged employees, but it works both ways.
mm.
Leadership needs to engage with their teams.
Would that also mean companies that are on hybrid or with a return to office policy actually has an edge over fully distributed companies where it's just so much harder, based on my imagination, on how you can drive culture remotely? Even writing a message, writing an email, you have to be more intentional, more emotion into it. Is that going to be the case?
Oh, absolutely. And I think the reality is, look, the future of work happened, right? We are experiencing it now. I know people want to kind of transition back to where we were in, 2019 of, back to the office 5 days a week. Lots of organizations wanting to do that. But those organizations that have fully embraced hybrid working and remote working, more fully, they are intentional about actually, there are times when human in person, in the same place collaboration is really important.
Mm,
Let's think about how we get people to jump on that, Teams call, Zoom call, Slack meeting, whatever, so that let's use technology to our advantage and communicate and then
mhm,
follow up with, the email, the blog, whatever. But it's definitely, I don't know whether it's an edge, but I think it's an embracing and making it work for you in a way that's meaningful to your organization. And I think it's being realistic about what works for you and your teams. And, you know, even the sub teams that you have your whole organization, but even, your sub teams and departments will have their own culture about the way they need to interact. So I think it's recognizing what's the work that needs to get done.
mhm.
Are we all clear on that and the part we play in that? And therefore, how do we need to communicate to the organization and with each other and finding, the mechanisms that work for you?
Let's see. And I'd like to go back to the red flags that we were talking about, because to me, the best way to solve a problem is to avoid it in the first place. And
Yeah.
with what you have seen so far, could you give us an examples of red flags, of course, that you have personally seen and also personally heard of other people looking at the red flags and worst case, overlooking it altogether?
Yeah. I'm trying to think of a good example actually, but I think over the years, you sort of see people, want to develop their careers and they sort of go, look, this organization, it's all, lovely and shiny. And they're saying this, this, and this. And then the reality of the role isn't kind of the role that they were interviewed for. And, the expectation of what needs to be delivered. And, it's sort of, sometimes you see the red flags as in this is a fast paced, quickly changing environment. And you just sort of go, is that a red flag? Because people don't know what they're doing and they're constantly changing their minds about stuff. And they're just moving faster than they maybe aren't able to. And that's
Mm,
leading to burnout in the organization, you know, asking questions around, why did that last team member leave? And whilst people won't necessarily need to divulge, the exact particulars of it,
yep.
you know, is there a way that they're articulating that you sort of go, was this person fired?
Mm,
Did they leave voluntarily? Were they burnt out from it? And I think just being really smarter about digging in your interviews
mm,
to avoid, and if you get a sense of those red flags, and I think it's being a better candidate, right?
mm,
Because this is not just about the organization finding the right candidate for them. Your work has to have a bit of purpose, your personal purpose aligned to it,
mhm,
right? Otherwise, it makes the job just infinitely harder. So I think, being smarter about the questions that you ask about interviews, being really open, follow those questions.
mm,
I think you can get to the point of the red flags and avoid them before it's too late.
mm.
And I think then if you haven't explored that in the interview, when you're onboarding, you will definitely find red flags. People start to open up during that onboarding induction phase, right? In those first few months. And whilst none of us kind of want to be a quitter, maybe it's
Mm,
better to quit in those first few months
yep.
when you really see those concerning red flags, if you have the opportunity to be able to find an alternative role.
Mhm,
Not that I would preach that necessarily, but I think, sometimes you just don't know until you get into the role and into the organization.
mm,
An interview is a bit of a PR job, right, from the organization. So they want to attract candidates. And I know that sounds horribly cynical, but sometimes then you get under the bonnet of things
Mm.
once you get into the organization and you sort of start finding I don't want to use this phrase, but it is literally sometimes the skeletons in the closet.
I hear you. I remember many years back, I actually quit a job after the very first day. It's just full of skeletons, nothing but skeletons. And I thought, okay, I think I should go. There's no way I can salvage this situation. And I left. And I think you made a very good point. It's not just based on observation. And I think a lot of people overlook the fact that they can actually ask questions to distill exactly what this company is about and also to help you find out some hidden information. And I think one of the key things that I've learned from a good friend of mine is to ask the interviewer, what is the hardest business decision you ever have to make here? And that will give you a sense of, okay, what is their approach to problem solving? What is their approach to a stressful moment? Because all this will eventually have an impact on you if you were to join this company and working under this person. So I think that is great advice for everyone out there who may be on the lookout to move into a new role. Remember, use those opportunities to ask the right questions. Ask any questions to help you understand more about this organization. Now, on the flip side, of course, we're not going to be talking about negative. There's also a lot of positive. There's a lot of green flags. How do we observe or look out for green flags? What are green flags? Are they even called green flags to begin with? Not sure. But what are things that we can easily distill that, okay, this company has a healthy and thriving culture?
I think, those organizations, whilst I'm not a fan of, in a cast of thousands interviewing candidates, I think those organizations that think about who are the key stakeholders that individuals need to meet. So you get to
Mm,
see not just the leaders of the organization interviewing the candidates, you get to see team members and you can ask them about challenges and, really ask them about the culture and ask them, what's making you stay here? And or saying, what would you change if you could? What are the challenges? What are the good things? Ask that of the, team members and peers that you meet in that interview process. I think the organizations that, are really open right from the get go, I personally want people to know, you know, these are the challenges we've got, but if you come on board, we're talking about culture add that you bring, your
mm,
thinking, your diverse perspective. What would you do to help us solve this problem?
mm,
Being open around that, I think is really, really helpful. I think if organizations are willing to do that, and I'm not saying, again, you're sharing, sort of sensitive information. We can sign an NDA if you want to do that, when you're interviewing candidates. But I think, just being really open, showing them around the office, getting them to meet people,
mm,
in a slightly more relaxed way. Those organizations that sort of just go, hey, meet the team, have a coffee, ask them
mm.
anything. And you say to the team, look, please be open. Obviously it's not a therapy session or anything, but like this person isn't going to solve all your problems when they come in. But I think it's really, really important
Mm,
to just be in the office environment. If that person if the candidate can, spare a good couple of hours, let's not drag this out over a couple of, 2, 3 weeks and an hour here, an hour there. A chunk of time, a good couple of hours, get to really understand what the role expectation is, who your teammates, do you actually feel a sense of connection with these teammates that you're meeting?
mm,
Because you've got to rebuild those relationships as that new person. And, likewise, you've got to build that trust. Do you feel like this is an environment I can work in?
mm.
And you generally do, and you should trust your gut. You will generally get a sense of that when you walk into that office space and that environment.
Okay, now for any HR leader who are tasked with shaping, transforming the culture within an organization, what are some of the concrete steps or maybe some baby steps you believe they should start to look at?
I think the first piece of advice is be brave because, wanting to build a meaningful culture it's incredibly rewarding,
Mm,
but sometimes it can be tough because you've got to win hearts and minds. But I would say have those open conversations with leadership
mhm,
and understand what is it that they want? What is their vision around that culture? How do they want their teams to feel when they turn up to work? And that's not actually a intangible step to take. It's a
mm,
really, really important conversation to have. And you should have it as, even at the interview stage, as that HR person, is what do you want the culture to be? What do you think the gaps are? And I
mm.
think having that kind of almost like a culture audit
Yeah.
in the early stages is And that gap may often be what's leadership's perception of the culture and how it's working
Mm,
versus the employees. So then what do we have to do to bring it together to make sure that it's a cohesive culture? So I think thinking about how would you describe the culture is a really, may seem like a simple question, but asking that of the leaders of the organization and then of the team members is a really important, fairly easy step. And you will soon get a view. It may be slightly more holistic. It may not be as data driven,
hmm.
but it will give you information and insights into the organization.
I see. And I also want to understand your opinion on this because we talk about the importance of leadership participating in driving culture. If that is the case, and that's a consensus that leader has to play an active role, why are some leaders outsourcing this critical aspect?
I think I guess my question back to you is when you say outsourcing, how would you describe that outsourcing? Do you mean to the HR function or to kind of external consultants?
Mm,
And I think the reality is, as an HR leader, you are very much part of that leadership team. You have a voice both for the business and for the employees. And I don't necessarily think it's outsourcing. I think it's around if you see it as accountability,
mm,
there is a person in the organization that is holding leaders to account. They should be holding themselves to account and holding themselves accountable, I should say. But I think it's because it it seems to have sort of gravitated towards HR owning it.
yeah.
But I think, you know, let's see it as a subject matter expert. We're there to coach, support, and advise the leaders on what culture is and how it should be delivered through the organization and felt and experienced. And I think, as a team, you work towards that, but you have that subject matter expert in the same way that you would have finance
Mhm,
as the finance subject matter expert, where you have your CTO as the, technical expert, and the CEO around that, vision and strategy, whilst you all work together in your various roles to deliver that. I think it's more think about it as you have that person as the subject matter expert,
mm,
but you're there to kind of be accountable, but hold your leadership team accountable equally.
mm. And for anyone who may be trying to convince their leaders to place more emphasis or to see the importance of culture building, but maybe struggling to get that buy-in. Are there any tips or advice or strategies you believe they can apply to make that conversation easier or to be a bit more convincing in trying to get the leadership on their side?
Yeah, I think look at the kind of health and well-being of your organization. You know, you can get some really good data. I think.
Mhm,
I mean, it's a small start around that. What kind of sickness absences do you have? Is there a lot of stress and burnout in the organization? When people are leaving, when what kind of feedback are you getting in those exit interviews? Do those exit interviews?
mm,
What are your what's your feedback you're getting in sort of the performance reviews around behaviors? If you choose to, have your performance reviews in that way, how's your organization developing?
mm,
And I think it's understanding the health of your organization is a really good way to start understanding, where your culture's at. If you've got really good retention rates, and you've got kind of a healthy organization, you don't have too many absences that are maybe related to stress and burnout or, other kind of mental health issues. I think that people are saying are aligned to kind of the roles and the work that they're doing or, how the organization's functioning and operating, I think is a start.
mm,
But it's showing them the data and going, look, this is where it's not working. And here are some things that we need to do, and I think whilst, it's a standard question, right, in the employee engagement surveys around leadership communicating. If that's kind of ratings, on a lower scale, you have to sit up and think about it. You've got some data now that people are going, you're not communicating with us. We're not understanding, the direction of travel here. I'm not happy in my role. Use that data whilst, I think the way we do and think about engagement surveys maybe needs to change. And that's probably a conversation for another day. I think it's what is kind of a standard, right? People
mm,
lean into their kind of employee engagement survey, but critically need to follow up on that information that's coming out, you do need to do something with it, and you need to do it in a lot more of a timely manner. We don't just say, oh, we did the 2023 engagement survey, so we're going to put it into our 2024 goals. You kind of need to have a bit more of an immediacy about it.
Right. And in your opinion, who's your favorite go-to companies when we talk about culture building that truly exemplify culture building, really emphasizing and putting a lot of priority on building the culture of their organization?
I think one that really stands out, and they're a really kind of forward-thinking organization called Peerdom, and they've kind of developed a software as well that helps other organizations think about the work that needs to be done. You know, it's almost like a distributed leadership model. And the founders there and the team just have a really interesting way of thinking about the work that needs to get done, who owns the work. And then equally, they've made that into a software that helps other organizations think about, the structures or the way organizations need to deliver work. And I think that's really forward thinking. Those types of organizations that see everybody as a leader, that are really opening their culture around purpose, being really purpose led, being really mindful about how they talk about their culture internally and externally. And I think those organizations that want people to, obviously, my kind of phrase is we want people to thrive and do their best work. But those organizations that recognize, look, there's lots of hard work to be done. We all play a part and can be successful in that. But we also want to put mechanisms in place so that, you're thriving as well. You're not having, maybe disconnected policies and processes that hamstring people from doing the work. They're mindful about that. And I think, organizations that really think about their people as those organizations, and people are getting better at sort of sniffing out those organizations, and people are getting better about talking about how they operate more internally.
Yep.
As opposed to just some sort of PR spin of, oh, here are our values, come join us. People are being more open and communicating and articulating a lot better, what we call the EVP, or I like to call it, it's more of a USP, right? What's that unique thing about your organization that actually enables people to align their personal purpose with the organizational purpose?
Yeah. And I think in today's context, it's so much easier to see through the spin, right? You can just go to Glassdoor, maybe Reddit in the worst case scenario. You'll be able to read so much about the innings of what is going on in the organization. My personal favorite when it comes to at least having that external impression that a company has a good culture is a company called Valve. Valve is a gaming company, and somewhere on the internet lives an employee handbook that they have curated, that they have designed. Is really nice. It's really amazing. And it would be able to break down what are some of the principles, philosophies, behavior that they expect of employees and how they expect of the management. And it's really a nice read. It reads like a storybook. It feels like a game. And I think it really gives people clarity on how this company truly think, because this is a public document. There's no going about, this is just for you, I'm going to behave differently. That's not the case. And I think these are, again, all the different signs that we all can look at when it comes to culture building. Now, we've covered quite a lot, but before we let you go, we also have this rapid fire segment, which we're going to ask you some short questions and, of course, expecting some short answers from you as well. So I'm going to start first. And the first question is, work from home or work from office?
Hybrid.
In a short sentence, describe your leadership philosophy.
I would say trust, accountability, and good communication are the keys to good leadership.
What is one of the best HR advice you have ever given or received?
I think it's around career development, and the grass is only greener where you water it.
That's a good one. Name one trend, HR trend or innovation that excites you the most.
This isn't very quick fire, but it excites me and scares me at the same time. But I would say AI and how it will actually enable the workforce and organizations more.
And last question, what's the most common HR myth or misconception that you wish to debunk?
That we're the department that fires people.
Thank you so much.
We're in the room, but we're not the ones that make that decision.
True that. Now, for people who may be keen to learn more about yourself and what you do, where can they go to?
Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn and I will talk to you about all things people, culture, purpose, and leadership.
Thank you so much, Soreya. Thank you for sharing with us your insights, your know-how, your opinion, all about culture building. I'm sure our listeners have great insights on all these matters, and at the very least, see in them some interest to explore this further and hopefully applying this into their organization and bring it to a new heights. Thank you so much for coming onto the show.
Thanks for having me, Adrian.